How do you define the word gringo?
It's basically a term used to define a person that lives in Peru but has been born in another country, mostly the US or Canada.
Means someone who is not from the country that they are inhabiting, like their first language is English. Maybe that they don't speak enough of the other language.
An American that is usually in Latin American territory.
When I think of the word gringo, I think of a American who's trying to speak Spanish or American living in a Latin American country.
What are your connotations of the word gringo?
I think Peruvians use it to just like it as an endearment term, not necessarily to offend anybody. They just use it because they believe it defines the culture and identity of a person that's not necessarily from Peru.
I think at this school, it's used as more of an offensive thing, and it has a bad connotation because a lot of people who are referred to as gringos aren't actually like fully American, and that categorizes them into one group. When maybe they don't feel comfortable being referred to as a gringo.
I think that sometimes it can be offensive if the American isn't familiar with the word that Latin Americans use, but other than that, I think it's a very neutral word to describe Americans.
Honestly, I know there's a negative connotation behind it, but me personally, if someone calls me gringo, I just don't care. I just think it's just another label, or it's not. I don't think it's bad because we are at a loss. Like especially Americans in a South American country who know really bad Spanish, we deserve to be called gringo. But I don't take much offense.
Well, I grew up with the word gringo being almost as a stereotype of what someone from Mexico would call us, and it was actually more of a sort of a judgment, I would think, of Latin Americans or of Mexicans than it would be of like any kind of self-reflection of myself as a white person.
What was your first experience when you used the word gringo? When was it the first time?
And now that I think about it, I believe that the first time that I heard the word was actually in elementary school when I think a guy called Max came into my first grade classroom, and automatically I think Cesar called him a gringo, and I didn't know that was actually like a word to call somebody. Like I never heard it because my parents never used it because my mom's family is from the States.
I think the first experience I heard it was when I moved here, I guess, because like I never had been considered one until I moved here in 9th grade, because like I'm not fully American, but like people categorize me into the gringos.
Actually, in the U.S., there is this funny story. It's actually true. There's this like Mexican kid who just moved, and he called me gringo because I kept making fun of his English.
Since my dad is Peruvian, I've always been familiar with Peru's culture, and I've heard this word a lot of times each time a Peruvian has tried to refer to Americans and use the word gringo. But I can maybe see why it can be offensive to some Americans.
Why?
Because it's just a stereotype saying that all Americans are the same, or all Americans have maybe like blonde hair or act the same or are white, when that's not always the case.